Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1992 science fiction action film, Universal Soldier. Now, this is not what I would consider to be one of my all-time favorite films, but it's a fun movie. And I think it's a good mix of sci-fi and action. And I definitely do think that it's one of the better films in Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren's filmography. And I absolutely feel that it's easily the best film in this particular franchise. And it's not even close. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I would like to give a special shout out to Adrian for requesting this review, as well as reviews of handful of other Universal Soldier films. The first Universal Soldier is directed by Roland Emmerich, and this is before he directed films like Independence Day and Stargate, and before he was known as the disaster guy, the new disaster film auteur. And this was around the time when he was doing a lot of independent films, either in Australia or in the U.S. I think a lot of his films actually he did before this were not U.S. productions. Maybe they might have shared a little bit with the U.S., but for the most part, they were productions overseas, like Making Contact and Moon 44. He was not intended to be the original director for this film, though. The original director was Andrew Davis, who has a pretty good track record of action films. Because this film was originally supposed to be, I think, released earlier, and he was tabbed to direct the film in 1990. So he would have followed up Above the Law, Code of Silence, and The Package with Universal Soldier. But something happened, and he wasn't able to direct it, so he just decided to stay on as a writer, and Carlico wound up replacing him with Roland Emmerich. And Roland is also the reason why Dean Devlin was brought on board to help with the screenplay. Uh, and Andrew Davis, he's uncredited, by the way, when it comes to his contributions to the film. And I don't think a lot of them actually wound up in the final cut of the movie. And honestly, I'm a bit conflicted on Davis over Emmerich. Because I think Emmerich still did a good job with this film, but Davis had already done Above the Law and Code of Silence. And he already had honed his skills and was already an established action director. Like, he was already a guy who knew how to direct an action film. And Emmerich was just kind of learning on the fly with this movie. And as much as I think he ultimately still did a solid job with Universal Soldier, I think Andrew Davis would have done an even better job. So I think that's a little unfortunate that we didn't get to see Davis direct this movie and then follow up Universal Soldier with Under Siege. But as it is, Emmerich still was decent enough. And what's funny about Emmerich and his direction for this film, I definitely feel that it was the action scenes where he shined the most. When it comes to the scenes involving a lot of explosions, a lot of pyrotechnics, a lot of stunts, squibs, and martial arts. I definitely think that's really where he delivered his best effort when it comes to scenes that are trying to establish tone, trying to establish atmosphere, trying to be dramatic, I don't think it was nearly as good. And this is a film that has, in my opinion, a lot of points in it where it kind of is a bit too slow, or the plot is moving along at not as quick of a pace as it should. And I think visually it definitely matches that at points. And I do think that there are some inconsistencies with the visuals as well. Either due to how he ultimately framed his sequences, or he wound up directing some of the scenes, or utilizing the camera work. But when it comes to the pyrotechnics, when it comes to the car chases, when it comes to the big moments, I think Emmerich did, for the most part, a pretty excellent job. And for a film like Universal Soldier, that's definitely what the draw is. So I think at the end of the day, he still did a good enough job to not really be too much of a detriment to the film, and utilize pans and zooms and some other camera techniques to provide it with a little bit of an extra attitude, and a little bit of an added punch to some of the action scenes. And I think Emmerich really ultimately did a good job, but it definitely is one of those films where you can kind of tell that you've got a director who's kind of learning the ropes as he goes, when it comes to this kind of film that he's directing. You definitely saw that early on, with the scene at the dam, and with the first introduction of the Unisols. And then you kind of see that a little bit further on throughout the film. And that's where I think somebody like Andrew Davis really would have elevated the film even more. But as is, still good. Now, the film is written by Richard Rothstein, Christopher Lettich, and Dean Devlin. And this is a screenplay, to me, that I think it's got a really good idea, but there are points where the execution is a little bit off. Like, it's a little off target. Needed to be calibrated a little tighter in the end. But it starts off very strong, with this prologue with Luke Devereaux and his deranged Sergeant Andrew Scott in Vietnam, and the confrontation that the two have, and it ultimately turning deadly, where the two wind up killing each other, and they get put in body bags, and then they are put on ice. And years later, their bodies are then reanimated by the military, and by the U.S. government, with some secret clandestine operation called Universal Soldier. And they take these dead soldiers and they reanimate them with, a serum. And it's glowing green, as if it is the Reanimator serum, to be honest. It's kind of a ripoff of Reanimator, if you really think. They just use the glow-in-the-dark Reanimator serum to create super soldiers. And it showcases the Unisols in this hostage situation early on, which even involves some pretty impressive stunt work, with stunt performers walking down a dam. And this whole first scene with the Unisols, I've honestly always felt was a little underwhelming. Like, I think the whole shot, the wide shot of the Unisol walking down the dam, is pretty impressive. But then when you get to the Unisols doing other stuff, when it comes to taking care of the hostage situation, it's just a quick punch to the face. It's a quick kick here and there. It's a quick throat slash or neck crunch. And it just doesn't really have a lot of adrenaline. Like, it's not that exciting. It just feels like it's a little too quick. They get there, they get the job done, it's over, and then you kind of have to wait a little bit until you get another action scene that is really able to provide some thrills and some excitement. And I don't know if it's the direction that's to blame for that. I don't know if it's the script or it's both, but I do have to admit that bit has always disappointed me. Now, after all of that happens, you get a little introduction to what will be one of the main characters, this reporter named Veronica. And she's trying to get a story because she just got fired. And she winds up following the Unisol truck somewhere and starts taking photos. And the colonel or the general who's in charge of the project sees her on the security camera footage, orders some Unisol to try to take her out. This is where Luke Devereaux, who is one of the resurrected Unisols, decides to break protocol and help her. And Luke and Veronica then go on the run. This is also when Andrew Scott remembers who he is and also goes rogue. And this is another part of the script and the story which I honestly felt could have been handled better. I have to be honest. Because after all of this happens, Luke and Veronica, they go on the run, and you have a long stretch where there's really not a lot of action. There's like a little car chase with a little bit of some bullets flying, but it's not really anything that's that impactful. It's not anything that's really providing the thrills. And it starts to slow down and takes more time to develop the characters. And I think that's fine. And I think that actually is a positive in actually a decent number of ways for this film. Because I think the script does a great job establishing Luke Devereaux as a character and his dynamic with Veronica. But I think it could have done that in a little bit of a tighter way. Or maybe throw in another action set piece in between these moments. Because it just feels like it starts to drag a little bit. But it picks up once you get to the hotel. And then you have that bit where Luke is running through the walls, which is a really fun idea. And the remaining Unisols show up and shoot up the place. And Luke and Veronica manage to get away. And then it's just another lull again. And it's just doing more character development. And it's having a lot of moments where Luke is struggling to remember who he is, or they're stopping to get ice in order to cool Luke down because if his body gets too hot, he shuts down. But you are getting some pretty tense moments with Andrew Scott, though, because he's starting to completely snap out of whatever funk he was in, and now he's back to being the psychopathic sergeant that he was before he died. And he thinks he's still in Vietnam, so he's completely gone Section 8. And that's when you get some really great scenes, like the one in the supermarket when Scott is just completely losing it and is like shooting at security guards, and he's going on insane rants. And prior to that, you do get a little bit with a gas station sequence that has a massive explosion. Uh, and you get the scene where Van Damme is showing his ass. And that happens a lot in this movie. Uh, and to be honest, that happens a lot in Van Damme movies. It's just a thing that Van Damme likes to do, apparently. And that's when you get that bit where Veronica pulls out the tracking device out of his leg. But even that scene kind of suffers with some yokel gas station owner who's just kind of annoying comic relief. And that's another thing. The comedy in this script is very hit and miss to me. There will be some moments where it's funny, like some of the stuff with the hotel clerk at the hotel, or the diner sequence, which I think is hilarious. I just want to eat. That scene is gold, and it features one of my favorite bar fights, to be honest, or favorite brawls. Uh, but other moments don't really work as well, and it kind of makes the tone a little off. And after the gas station thing happens, Veronica and Luke, they decide to try to uh, they try to get some more information on the Unisol program. They actually go into the Unisol van. They get some papers. That's when they find out about this man named Dr. Greger, who was responsible for the procedures to resurrect Luke Devereaux and these other soldiers. And that starts another portion of the film where it's just Veronica and Luke doing their own investigative reporting, basically. And you got a little bit of action going on between that with Andrew Scott and or the other remaining people who are part of the Unisol program after the colonel got shot by Andrew because he was telling Andrew to stand down. So you've got a little bit of tension there where they're trying to shut down Andrew, but then Andrew outsmarts them. And they try to take out some of Andrew's soldiers, but in the process, the soldier doesn't drop the grenade, so it just blows up the Unisol van with the remaining member of the Unisol program in it. And now Andrew's pretty much on his own, except for maybe one other Unisol, and that's what leads to the supermarket sequence and the freak out by Andrew Scott. And then when Veronica and Luke decide to go on this journey to find Dr. Greger, they learn that Luke's parents are still alive, and now Luke just wants to go home, and he wants to just leave Veronica there because he doesn't want her to be in danger. And then Veronica and Luke get arrested because Veronica got set up by the government, and she's considered to be a fugitive. And you get the prison bus chase, which is a great sequence. It's a great action scene with a lot of practical effects and stunt work and some great moments with Andrew Scott. You know, are we having fun yet? You know, and throwing the grenades. And then eventually it ends with the bus flipping over and falling off a cliff, and Luke and Veronica getting out of it before it crashes, and also seemingly Andrew in one of the other Unisol vans finding a way to end his own reign of terror by falling off the cliff. But you know that's not the case. You know he's not dead. But the film kind of carries on as if he died in the explosion, even though you know that's not going to be the case. And then you get the bit where Luke goes back home and he meets up with his parents again. And it's nice to see that moment where he reconnects with his humanity. And then you get the final showdown at Luke's farm, where Luke and Andrew duke it out. And the fight between Luke and Andrew is easily one of the biggest highlights of the film because it's very well choreographed and it features a ton of crowd pleasing moments. And the film did a really awesome job in terms of establishing Andrew Scott as a very formidable foe for Luke Devereaux. So when Luke has to fend him off and has to take him out in the end, it legitimately seems like a tall order at first. And I like how the script actually shows Andrew just throwing Luke around like a rag doll, just establishing dominance early on, beating the ever loving shit out of Luke, smashing his head into cars, and just throwing him multiple feet, and injecting himself with muscle enhancers, and just going absolutely wild on Luke Devereaux at the first. At first, anyway. And that establishes not only Andrew as a formidable threat, but it makes the moment when Luke gets back up and starts kicking ass all the more badass and all the more epic. The moment when he gets up and the flames are in the background and he starts doing the jump kicks, and then Andrew's like, now that's the spirit soldier. Like, I love that moment. And I love the moment that happens after that when they take the brawl into the barn, and Luke takes the muscle enhancers himself, and he just starts repeatedly just punching Andrew in the face, and then kicks him out of the barn. And then you follow that up with that moment with the thresher, where, and I think it's a thresher, I could be wrong, I don't know exactly what the piece of equipment is, but you follow all of that badassery with even more badassery, where Luke is just continuing to just beat the ever loving shit out of Andrew Scott with kicks and with punches. And you have the bit where Andrew's trying to tell him you're dead. And I love the line that Luke has. No, I'm alive. And then he kicks Andrew's ass onto the spikes. And I like how Andrew still isn't going down. He tries to bring Luke's head into the spikes and stab him with the spikes. But then Luke manages to fend him off and then breaks his arm. And then you have that great one-liner afterwards. You're discharged, Sarge. And then pulls the lever and then completely just cuts up Andrew with the thresher to bloody bits. It's a great finale. And it's honestly one of my favorite fights. It's so fantastic. And another thing about the finale that I like is that it doesn't really end with like a love story thing. It doesn't end with Veronica and Luke going to live happily ever after or anything. They embrace at the end, and Luke has saved his parents, and Andrew's dead. But it doesn't end in a way where it seems like, oh, we're just going to have a cookie cutter kind of ending. I like that about the movie. And I like that about the story. And speaking of the ending, there was an alternate ending that they shot for the film. and it really would have made the film completely different, and it would have made Universal Soldier, in my opinion, into a very disappointing movie. And I'm really glad that they reshot the ending, because this ending sucks. The original ending, it starts shortly after Scott takes Devereaux's family and Robert's hostage. As Devereaux grabs a shotgun in the kitchen, the front door opens. He sees his mother at the door before Scott shoots her. In the final fight between Devereaux and Scott, Devereaux does not use Scott's muscle enhancers, which is lame. And then shortly after grinding Scott to death, Devereaux is shot by his father before Dr. Christopher Gregor and his men appear. And then you get more bullshit twists where Gregor explains that he used Devereaux to entrap both Scott and him, and that Devereaux was staying with people posing as his parents. And then he has his men shoot Devereaux, but before Devereaux dies, the police and Robert's news crew arrives. The news crew douses Devereaux with a fire extinguisher to stabilize him, while Dr. Gregor and his men are arrested. Roberts is then given the microphone to cover the arrest, but she loses all composure while on air, and then decides to comfort Devereaux, which is that bit where Devereaux and Roberts are hugging each other. Several days later, Devereaux is reunited with his real parents, and then the film ends with a eulogy narrated by Roberts, who explains that Devereaux rejected all the life-prolonging medication before he died a natural death. And this film would have died, period, if it had that ending. So Universal Soldier is definitely one of those movies where a reshot ending was actually a good thing. So, but that definitely explains why there's a lot of elements of this script that just seem a little off, because they had to do rewrites and they had to do all this other stuff, and it just seems like this film was originally supposed to be darker and grittier and edgier, and then they decided to lighten the tone up and then change the ending, and at points the attempts to do that work, but at other points they don't. But because you have Jean-Claude Van Damme and you have Dolph Lundgren and you have such great action set pieces that are memorable and exciting, and you have a good idea with the Universal Soldiers, it winds up still working, despite the clunkier aspects of the screenplay. But overall, I do feel the script could have been better than what it is. The cast, though, I don't think you can get any better than this. Jean-Claude Van Damme in his prime as Luke Devereaux. It's honestly one of my favorite roles of his. I actually think he does a great job acting in this. The scenes when he has to be fraught with emotion, like in the beginning, when Andrew Scott is going crazy and he's telling that one Vietnamese woman to run, and he gets pissed at Scott. It seems like very real emotions from Van Damme. And then it continues when Van Damme is, he's resurrected as a Unisol, and he's having these flashbacks, and he's looking confused. And then as the film goes on, when he's going from this cold, inhuman, Terminator-like figure, and then as he starts to regain his memories and who he is, he gets more and more of his humanity, and he was more and more personality. And because Van Damme is just very charming naturally and charismatic, it just winds up becoming, in my opinion, a really effective transition. Dolph Lundgren is equally great to me as Andrew Scott, in also a pretty difficult role, and I think it's one of his best performances, especially the freak out moment in the supermarket. I think that features some of Lundgren's best acting, and him and Van Damme have great chemistry. They just send sparks when it comes to every scene that they're in this movie. And when it comes to them duking it out in the end. It's up there with any of the best cinematic fights that you will ever see. And it's just great to see these two in their prime just kick ass, all in the same movie. Ally Walker, I like as Veronica. She's got a certain spunk to her, a certain attitude that I think is a little unique. There are some moments where her line delivery is a bit off and not up to par, but most of the time I think it's a solid performance by her, and I do think that she has some good rapport with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Edo Ross, he's barely in the movie as Colonel Perry. There's not really much to say about his role in this. The same thing goes for the other Unisols like Ralph Moeller and Tiny Lister. But the only other actors I want to mention is Robert Trevor, who played the motel owner, who did a great job playing a sleazy motel owner. It was a lot of fun. And Jerry Orbach as Dr. Gregor. But this is absolutely Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren's movie. And they're two titans of the action genre, and they really do make this film into something, in my opinion, at times genuinely iconic, especially when it comes to the action genre. The film features some cinematography by Carl Walter Lindenlaub, which is fine. It's okay. But I don't think it's great. But I do think it's decent enough. It has some editing by Michael J. Duthie, which I think at points is a little laborious. Like, I think that it could have been tighter. At times, though, it's excellent, especially when it comes to the final fight between Devereaux and Scott. But there are some moments where I think the editing could have been better. The music by Christopher Frank, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. There are some aspects of the synth score that, or the synthesizers that he was utilizing, that sound a bit cheap. Honestly, I would have preferred a more traditional orchestral score with a few synth elements, but that's just me personally. It's a very atmospheric score, and I think it works in some regards, but there are other scenes where I really think the film could have used a different score. But that's just me. Soundtrack wise, there's not a lot other than maybe like Body Count that plays at the end credits. But that is also another element that could have been a bit better. But overall, I like the film. I like Universal Soldier, but because of some pacing problems, because of some script problems, and some other issues technically with the movie, it's a movie that I like, but I don't love. But it's a film that I love certain aspects of it. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. I love the final fight between those two. And I really like the idea of the Unisols. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts on Universal Soldier. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.